After the president's post on Truth Social yesterday, need to know, who does he think is more responsible for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Putin or Zelensky?
Well, look, his goal, Peter, is to bring this war to an end, period. And there has been ongoing fighting on both sides. It is World War I style trench warfare.
Pause for a second. Before National Security Advisor Mike Waltz continues down this path of covering for Trump, remember that the question was, who does the president think is more responsible for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Putin or Zelensky?
His frustration with President Zelensky is that you've heard is multifold. One, there needs to be a deep appreciation for what the American people, what the American taxpayer, what President Trump did in his first term, and what we've done since. So some of the rhetoric coming out of Kyiv, frankly, and insults to President Trump were unacceptable, number one.
So Mike Waltz's answer to the question of whether Trump believes Putin or Zelensky is responsible for Russia invading Ukraine, so far his answer is that Zelensky said some mean things about our Putin-soft president.
And number two, our own Secretary of Treasury personally made the trip to offer the Ukrainians what can only be described as a historic opportunity. That is for America to co-invest with Ukraine in their minerals, in their resources, to truly grow the pie. So case in point, there's a foundry that processes aluminum in Ukraine. It's been damaged. It's not at its current capacity. If that is restored, it would account for America's entire imports of aluminum for an entire year. That one foundry. There are tremendous resources there. Not only is that long-term security for Ukraine, not only do we help them grow the pie with investments, but we do have an obligation to the American taxpayer in helping them recoup the hundreds of billions that have occurred. So, rather than enter into some constructive conversations about what that deal should be going forward, we got a lot of rhetoric in the media that was incredibly unfortunate.
And somehow the second part of his answer had to do with our country getting something financially out of Ukraine due to Putin's invasion, specifically using their resources like aluminum to make up for the trade wars that Trump has started with other countries that'll cost Americans more money. MAGA's complete capitulation to Vladimir Putin's every demand has conservative media figures refusing to let them off the hook. And now they have no idea how to answer for it.
Defending Ukraine, and more importantly, not giving Vladimir Putin a win in any way, was in America's best interest. Here's a couple clips from you over the past 2 years. Take a listen.
The Russian military and the Russian government, they're not our friends. They are adversaries to us on the global stage.
Nobody wants to see Putin take the country.
We're not prepared to let Vladimir Putin win anything. Looking at the world right now, we are on the precipice, frankly, of World War III in a lot of cases. Russia is heavily involved in Ukraine.
We're not prepared to let Vladimir Putin win anything. The Russian military and government are not our friends. So why is Donald Trump effectively parroting what they're saying to push the people that Vladimir Putin's trying to kill?
First of all, thanks for playing some of my greatest hits. It was actually good to look at some of those. Secondly, I would say you
don't look a year older. You don't look a year older, I promise. No.
It's a black thing, but we'll move on. Look, here's the deal. He's not parroting anything that Vladimir Putin has said. That's not the case at all. But there has to be a legitimate deal for the United States as this conflict comes to a close. And rest assured, Donald Trump wants to bring this conflict to a close. And if you look at this just with clear eyes and not trying to pick sides, if you think that Ukraine is going to get everything they want out of this conflict, that's simply not the case.
Leland Vittert came up with receipts and facts that Byron Donalds couldn't dismiss as the liberal mainstream media trying to undermine Trump due to their Trump derangement syndrome that they always go to. And even though he baselessly dismissed the reality, Vittert wouldn't let him off the hook.
But words matter, and you said Donald Trump isn't parroting Putin's talking points, and that's where I have to question you, because he is. Because Putin is the one who says over and over again, this was Ukraine starting the war. Over and over again, Zelensky is a legitimate leader of Ukraine. Those are exactly the same things that Vladimir Putin says that Donald Trump is saying. How does that not weaken our ally who you've said over and over again needs to be protected?
No, it doesn't weaken them. What we're trying to do right now is get the necessary conditions to bring this conflict to an end. And I want to be clear on that. Second thing is, I think part of the reason that Vladimir Zelensky was upset is because he didn't have a seat at the table in these initial conversations.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If they had an ability to negotiate an end to the conflict, they would have done that already without our assistance. They haven't been able to do that. So Donald Trump is going to do whatever he thinks is best in order to bring this conflict to a close. This is one of the reasons he was elected to be president of the United States, because we saw what was happening the other way when we were just sending billions and billions of dollars over to Ukraine. There was no end in sight. The American people don't have patience for that. President Trump doesn't have any patience for that. And so the process to ending this conflict is going to be a little bumpy, but the conflict must end.
He still didn't answer the question of why Trump is parroting Putin's talking points. Instead, he just moved on to distractions that only affect people that don't want to acknowledge just how Putin is dog-walking Donald Trump. It's a reality that people with TDS somehow always highlight it. It's so incredibly obvious their hopes of dodging the question keep coming up flat now that Fox News anchors are asking these questions too.
I want to get your take on what is happening here with what's being said about Ukraine, about the war, and how you see it as head of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Yeah, Brett, obviously there's been a little sparring between President Trump and President Zelensky this week, but I think they'll move beyond that because they have a shared goal, which is to bring an end to the fighting in Ukraine with a few common objectives.
But does the rhetoric hurt? Some noted conservatives are pushing back hard against the president. National Review says Ukraine didn't start the war. Ukraine is not the problem. In breathtaking remarks to reporters, President Trump poured contempt on Ukraine for its frustration. Ukraine didn't fire Russian missiles at itself or direct a Russian armed column at its own capital in 2022. There's moral equivalence, and then there's total moral inversion. And then you've got Mark Levin, who says Zelensky is not a dictator. Take a listen.
Ordered martial law. That's what the Constitution there compelled. Zelensky hasn't called for an election. That's what the Constitution there compels. Now, I'm waiting for the first free election for Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is almost comical in a sick way that Putin is demanding an election. Why is he demanding an election in Ukraine when he doesn't have free and real elections in his own country?
So the going take is that this rhetoric, no matter if it's negotiating, is empowering Putin in not a good way in their eyes.
Well, Brett, I don't think the president has empowered Vladimir Putin at all.
No, Tom Cotton didn't address the reality or evidence at all. He just dismissed it with nothing to back up his empty opinion. But for some reason, we've decided to accept Republican politicians telling us that reality isn't real, simply because they don't want it to be. Everything they say is completely free of facts.
To follow up on Peter's question, you wrote in an op-ed in the fall of 2023 that, quote, Putin is to blame, certainly like Al-Qaeda was to blame for 9/11. Do you still feel that way now, or do you share the president's assessment as he says Ukraine is to blame for the start of this war?
Well, it shouldn't surprise you that I share the president's assessment on all kinds of issues. What I wrote as a member of Congress was as a former member of Congress. Look,
pay attention to what he just said. He said his previous opinion on something that cannot be disputed, like who literally invaded which country illegally, doesn't matter because now he works for Trump. It's a simple admission that his truth changes based on who's leading him, which is a president that changes his truth based on who's leading him, who happen to be Vladimir Putin and, in unrelated cases, Elon Musk. What a bunch of weak, cowardly excuses for leaders. Listen real closely to the rest of Mike Waltz's answer here, and you might be able to hear the urine that's trickling down his leg.
what I share the president's assessment on is that the war has to end. And what comes with that? What comes with that should be, at some point, elections. What comes with that should be peace. What comes with that is prosperity that we've just offered in this natural resources and economic partnership arrangement, an end to the killing. And European security and security for the world. But this is a president of peace, and who here would argue against peace?
Okay, so you do share that assessment. And can I follow up? In 2017, then President Trump. Go ahead. Can I just follow up really quickly?
You just had two questions, Kate. Jordan, go ahead.
I have an important follow-up.
Jordan, go ahead.
So Mike apparently needed Caroline Leavitt to step in and protect him from any more damaging questions. Oh, also to give him a chance to change his pants. I mean, maybe they really are beginning to run out of places to pass off their empty lies and excuses now that conservative voices are realizing that the party's anti-Russia talk has suddenly become subservient to the same guy that they used to criticize. No, even the very pro-Trump New York Post sent a direct message to him over his claims of Ukraine being the aggressor and Zelensky being a dictator, with their recent cover here. The only time these guys have any smoke for anyone is when they're whining to the media about being called out for their fealty to Putin. What a pathetic group of non-principled fake tough guys this is.
Why we're getting this pushback and certainly this kind of, as the vice president said, bad-mouthing in the press for all the administration has done in his first term as well, and all the United States has done for Ukraine is just, it's unacceptable. They need to tone it down and take a hard look and sign that deal.